Welcome back to Outnumbered. Well, new concerns we could be edging closer to a military conflict with Iran. The United States sending a warship to the waters off of Yemen. The aircraft carrier USS Theodore Roosevelt is shadowing an Iranian convoy and launching aircraft to fly manned reconnaissance of the estimated 7 to 9 ships suspected of carrying weapons to Shiite rebels in Yemen. This after the United States and 6 world powers reached a framework deal with Iran on its nuclear program. And now the Obama administration is facing new pressure to tie those nuclear talks to the release of several U.S. prisoners in Iran. The latest case being that of Washington Post journalist Jason Rezaian. His lawyer saying Iran has charged him with espionage and other crimes. Here's acting State Department spokeswoman Marie Harf on whether his release and those of the others will be tied to the nuclear talks.
We will continue raising his case and the other 2 Americans who are detained, and Robert Levinson, who's missing. We'll continue raising them, but they are not, their fate and the outcome of these cases should in no way be tied to the nuclear issue.
Rezaian was arrested last July and is being held in Tehran's notorious Evin prison. His brother spoke to Greta about the situation last night.
He's got, severe depression. It's just been such a long time. He knows that he's been held twice as long as any prior foreign journalist, and it's just taken a huge toll on him because, as you pointed out, they say he's an Iranian citizen, but they're not giving him the rights of an Iranian citizen. They've been disregarding all of their legal process and have held him virtually in limbo since the beginning.
This hostage situation is very serious, and we haven't heard a lot from the White House, Harris, about the hostages as part of this deal. But kudos to our own Greta Van Susteren, who has stayed on this story for months.
All right, just a couple of things with regard to the U.S. Navy ships, because that's kind of what's breaking this hour. Fox News asked official close ties to the administration, we're not naming that person, whether or not we would consider boarding any suspected Iranian ships. And really, what would have to be in place treaty-wise for that to happen? But quote-unquote from this official, the White House is not even close to making a decision on whether or not they board. But to count right now, we've got in excess of 9 naval ships in that part of the world as the USS Theodore Roosevelt pulls into place this warship. One other point. The Pentagon and the U.S. Central Command are saying today that 9 of those U.S. Navy ships are reinforcing that resolution that was passed in the UN last week by 14 nations. Guess which one was absenting? Russia.
Our dear friends in Moscow.
Yes.
And Guy,
Reset button.
We have not heard of these hostages being part of the deal. Why not?
Well, because the administration doesn't want anything attached to the deal. So let's just assume that Iran was going to give up its nuclear program under the framework, which they're not. Look at what is not being discussed. Iran's human rights record, these prisoners, obviously, their #1 status as the #1 exporter of terrorism around the world, their hostility in the region, which we're seeing in Yemen. There's a whole list, their illegal missile program. None of these things are being touched. The administration wants to isolate the nuclear issue, and I can understand the justification for doing that if they were actually going to accomplish their stated goals, which, according to the administration and the regime, they're not.
It is the one card, and when we talk about who holds the cards, Kennedy, and really the United States holds all the cards, but Iran does have that card with the hostages. And I don't think it's a coincidence that we're seeing these ships into the Middle East, because I think we telegraphed to the Iranians how weak we are with this deal. So, of course, that's why they're moving in and doing what they're doing. But speak a little bit about the hostages.
I mean, there's, if I'm the president, I'm looking around going, there's so much drama. Here they are, like, we're trying to do a nuclear deal, and then with the ships. These hostages from their various backgrounds, aren't you a little surprised that we haven't heard about this, that this hasn't been the top line issue when discussing a nuclear treaty with Iran? I mean, this is incredibly important. These are American citizens. You're talking about a U.S. Marine, a member of the VFW. And the VFW and the only people standing around going, can we get our guy back? Like, not our Guy Benson, but, a person who has served this country honorably. What is going on, and why is this bargaining chip being pushed to the side? No wonder the president doesn't want Congress involved, because perhaps there are some rational members over there who will say, oh, wait, there's Americans, and you had no problem trading 5 Taliban prisoners for a deserter, but you will not attach their lives and freedom to a potential deal. Why is that?
Rachel, I was just going to bring that up. Kennedy just sucked the thought right out of my skull. Thank you for the sucking sound, Kennedy. She's our human sound effects machine, everybody. Rachel, we saw the president go to the Rose Garden, talk about the prisoner swap. We know that he's made even a compelling case for a deserter to swap 5 Taliban prisoners. So if he wants to, he really can play hardball to get an American back, even one that could have turned on his country. Why aren't they doing it with these Iranian hostages?
I don't know. First of all, I think he's a terrible deal maker. I mean, he bends over backwards for this deal, and then they send out these destroyers. But I don't know. I mean, he's ticking off the military. He's also ticking off a lot of people who care about religious freedom, because there's the Christian guy that's also, he's a pastor, correct?
Yeah. He's a pastor.
The pastor. So, I mean, he's ticking people off all over the place. It's incomprehensible. Nobody understands. I wish somebody would leak something from the administration so we can understand what the rationale is.
Well, that happens. You know what, real quickly, it's interesting to note that the president just might want to send a thank you note to Congress for the bill that's working its way through to his desk regarding getting Congress involved in that Iran deal, because maybe he's looking for an out now, a pass. Like, oh my gosh, we got to pull our ships into, they got 6 of our guys. Maybe it's time to say no for that deal, but he doesn't want to just walk away from the table. And Congress may be able to give him that out.
We're actually going to ask a different set of questions, new questions about women in combat, as the Army Rangers released the results of their physical fitness exam. This was the first year women were allowed to try out for the Army Ranger School. And here's some of what they were required to do. Could you do this? No, it's crazy. Students had to perform 49 push-ups in 2 minutes, 59 sit-ups in 2 minutes. These are military sit-ups, by the way, and not just those teeny tiny little crunches that you do. 6 chin-ups to a strict standard, and listen to this, they had to complete a 5-mile run in 40 minutes. That is an 8-minute mile. It's crazy. So how did the women do? 16 of the 19 who tried out, they passed the first hurdle, which is great, a promising sign. But it also comes just weeks after a similar experiment by the Marines ended with 0 female graduates. Despite that, the military says it is still trying to open up more ground combat jobs for women. So, Harris, what does the colonel have to say about this? I mean, how does your dad,
and not the colonel, my dad
Sanders,
is in a different time zone, is eating his breakfast right now, and he's probably looking up going, did Kennedy just call me out? She want to know what I think about this? He would tell me to call Representative Martha McSally. Did I say her name right? McSally from Arizona. Yeah, my other home state, I should know. Because she's a former Air Force pilot and had to deal with this issue of women in combat, and, you know, tore down some doors and broke through some glass ceilings and so on and so forth, and has finished Ironman races and runs with her dog every day. And he would tell me to call her and to say, do you really want the rules bent for you? And I think her answer might be no, but I'll put in a call later. I think in this instance you play to people's strengths.
Yeah.
So if I can't scale a wall in 1.6 seconds, but I can fly the heck out of a fighter jet and pretty much hit everything, because that was at one point my goal too, I think you call on me to do what I do well, and trust me, I'll get it done.
But you know, Rachel, some of these women, I mean, they're incredible. You know, the fact that they're up against odds, they want to fight in the grit, in the dirt, you know, with their fellow Marines and soldiers. I think it's pretty amazing. I mean, these are the kind of women that I would want to hire, that I would want to be next to, fighting for me, because you know, if they're working this hard and trying to, you know, break the last glass ceilings in the military, that they're going to die for you.
Yeah, but if you were in a very dangerous situation, would you want the guys who are passing or the girls who aren't passing? And the truth is, these are dangerous jobs. If you can meet the standard, I don't think the doors should be closed to women, but they have to meet the standards, and I think they should not change the standards to meet where the women are at. It's too important of a job. This isn't, you know, this isn't a corner office. This is the real deal.
This isn't Soul Cycle on a Tuesday morning.
Yes.
Where Kennedy was kicking my behind, okay? Yeah.
I want someone who could do a real
I was panting and paddling away, and she was doing a really good job, so kudos to you. But no, these women, I mean, they are really, really skilled and very incredible. And we have one of our own at Fox News Channel, Leah Gabriel, who, as you mentioned, was a fighter pilot. And I would defer to her on this. And I recently saw her on Fox and Friends talking about this exact same issue. And I've got to say, lowering the standards is a huge mistake. Yeah. If they can compete, absolutely. Women, if they want to be on the front lines, let them do it. If they can pass the tests. And there's a lot of women, believe me, that can probably pass those tests.
Oh,
if they can't, we should not lower the standards.
And maybe with time they will start to pass the tests, but we shouldn't change it.
But if you look in the case of combat pilots, I mean, women are naturally analytical. There's some gifts that we can bring to the table. You don't have to put us all in one box. We can do a lot of different things. By the way, there's some men who can't pass those physical tests. And you don't hear us talking about this.
Are you going to do it?
You don't want us to
5
lower the
miles
standards
at an
for men.
8-minute clip, I would be waylaid for a month.
Well, you could do it in a car.
I'm exhausted
well,
thinking about it.
You would do it in a car as well, and we wouldn't judge. He was the first Republican to officially explore a 2016 presidential run. But Jeb Bush still has not actually jumped into the race. So why is this? Plus, he's one of the biggest celebrity climate change activists. But that doesn't stop him from taking those gas-sucking private jet flights across the globe 6 times in about a month and sailing around in fuel-gobbling mega yachts. That's how you do it, Leo. Is this just another example of Hollywood celebrities not practicing what they preach?
No.
Leo, say it ain't so. Stay right here.